Desmond Achille, had $11.40 in his wallet the night he found her. He remembered the exact amount because he had counted it twice at the gas station before deciding the tank could wait until payday. That was a Thursday in late November, the kind of cold that settles into your joints and reminds you that Edmonton is not a city that forgives carelessness. He was driving his 2009 Civic home from a double shift at the warehouse, 12 hours on his feet, stacking and unstacking pallets of flooring tiles, and he had taken the long way because the highway ramp was iced over and he had already slid through one intersection that week. He almost missed her entirely. She was lying half off the curb on 118th Avenue, between a closed laundromat and a dumpster that had been there so long it had its own weather system. At first, Desmond thought she was a pile of garbage bags someone had left out early. Then the headlights caught her hand, pale and open against the wet pavement, and something in his chest went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. He pulled over. He sat in the car for 3 full seconds. He would think about those 3 seconds for a long time afterward, and then he got out. She was young, maybe late 20s. Her coat was expensive, the kind with the subtle logo on the collar that people in his neighborhood didn't own, but it was torn at one shoulder, and her face was a mess of blood and bruising. Her breathing was shallow and uneven, like a car engine trying to turn over in January. There was no phone beside her, no purse, nothing. Desmond crouched down. Hey, can you hear me? Her eyes didn't open. He called 911. While he waited, he took off his own coat and laid it over her because he didn't know what else to do, and the wind off the North Saskatchewan was cutting straight down the avenue. He stood in his hoodie and watched her chest rise and fall, and told himself she was going to be fine. She was going to be absolutely fine. The ambulance took 11 minutes. The paramedics asked Desmond, his name, his relationship to her, whether he had seen what happened. He said he didn't know her. He said he had just been driving by. One of the paramedics, a young woman with a tight braid down her back, looked at him for a moment before writing something in her clipboard. They took her. They took his coat with her, by accident. He drove the rest of the way home without heat. Desmond had lived in the same apartment on 95th Street for 6 years, since his wife Pauline passed, and the house they'd shared in Sherwood Park became too large and too quiet to survive in. His son Tobias was 9 then and was 15 now, all elbows and opinions, and he slept in the second bedroom behind a door plastered with stickers for bands Desmond had never heard of. When Desmond got home that night, Tobias was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal and a math textbook he was clearly not reading. "You're late," Tobias said without looking up. "Stayed to help someone." Tobias looked up then. He noticed the missing coat immediately. "Where's your jacket?" "Lost it. It's -16. "I'm aware." Tobias stared at him with the particular expression teenagers reserve for parents who are being deliberately vague. Then he pushed his cereal bowl toward Desmond, a gesture so small and automatic it nearly broke him. "There's still milk left." He went back 3 days in a row. Not to the spot on 118th. There was nothing to go back to there, but to the hospital. He told himself he just wanted to know she was all right. He told himself any decent person would want to know. He walked up to the desk in the emergency department each time and explained that he was the one who had called the ambulance. And each time a different clerk told him that patient information could not be released, and he nodded and said, "Of course, sorry," and went home. On the 4th day, a nurse found him in the hallway. She was older, maybe 60, with reading glasses on a chain and the kind of face that suggested she had seen every variety of human behavior and was no longer surprised by any of it. Her name tag said Patricia, which was also Desmond's late mother's name, a detail he filed away without comment. "You're the one who found Isabel," the nurse said. It wasn't a question. "I don't know her name," Desmond said. "Isabel Fairweather. She's been asking about the man who called the ambulance, the one who gave her his coat. She looked him over in a clinical, assessing way. You can come in. 5 minutes. Isabel Fairweather was sitting up in bed, and she looked different from the crumpled figure on the pavement. Still bruised, her left arm in a soft cast, but awake and present, and, most noticeably, angry. Not at him. The anger was aimed inward, the way it is when someone has been badly frightened and is using fury to keep the fear from resurfacing. She said, "You stayed with me until the ambulance came. Yes, you gave me your coat." "They kept it," he said, "accidentally. I don't suppose it's still here?" Something in her face shifted then, very slightly. She looked at the window for a moment. "I'll have it cleaned and returned to you. Don't worry about it. I want to." She looked back at him. "I want to do a lot more than that, actually. I need to know your name," he told her. He told her he worked at a warehouse, lived on 95th, had a son in grade 10. He was not sure why he told her all of it. He was a private person by nature and by grief. But she had a way of listening that was very still and very complete, like she was filing every word in a place she intended to revisit. He left after 8 minutes, which was 3 minutes longer than allowed, and the nurse with the reading glasses pretended not to notice. What Desmond did not know, what he had no way of knowing, because he was a man who spent his days stacking tiles and his evenings helping Tobias with chemistry homework, was that Isabel Fairweather was the only daughter of Gordon Fairweather, who had built Fairweather Capital Group from a single property management office in Calgary into a real estate portfolio worth somewhere in the range of $2 billion. Gordon was 71, recently widowed, and was the kind of man whose name appeared on the side of buildings, not in big letters, in the tasteful brass lettering of institutions that do not need to advertise. Isabel had been left on that sidewalk by her ex-fiancé, a man named Clifton Marsh, who had discovered 2 weeks prior that the prenuptial agreement he had signed was structured in a way that left him nothing if he was found to have committed fraud, which he had against Isabel's family trust to the tune of roughly $400,000. His lawyers had told him his best option was to make the problem disappear. On a Thursday night in November, returning from a dinner where Isabel had confronted him with documents, he had driven to a neighborhood where no one would look for her, and he had made his choice. Isabel had lived because of $11.40 and a man who took the long way home. The trouble started 18 days later. A detective named Houghton came to the warehouse where Desmond worked, not to the front office, to the floor, which meant Desmond's supervisor saw it, and the 2 men he worked beside saw it, and the story that circulated by lunch was that Desmond was being investigated for the assault itself. Detective Houghton was not unkind, exactly, but he was methodical in a way that felt deliberate, the way some people ask questions not to find answers but to unsettle. He wanted to know why Desmond had visited the hospital 4 times. He wanted to know the exact route Desmond had taken that night and why. He wanted to know whether Desmond and Isabel had known each other previously. Desmond answered every question. He had nothing to hide. But his supervisor, a man named Greg who had always seemed neutral about Desmond in the way that a rock is neutral about weather, called him into the office the following afternoon. "I can't have this," Greg said. He did not specify what this was. He did not need to. "I didn't do anything," Desmond said. "I know," Greg said, and he sounded like he might even believe it. "But the other guys are talking, and the client," he shrugged. "It's a liability thing." Desmond drove home in silence. He sat in the parking lot of his building for 20 minutes before going upstairs. He made dinner, rice and chicken thighs, Tobias's preferred meal, and did not say anything about the job. He waited until Tobias was in bed, and then he sat at the kitchen table and looked at his phone and thought about who he could call. There was no one obvious. His sister lived in Mississauga and had her own complications. His friend Raymond from the old neighborhood had drifted. Pauline had been his person, the one who would have sat down across from him and said, "Tell me everything," and meant it. And she had been gone for 6 years, and sometimes that distance felt like 6 weeks. He did not call anyone. He went to bed. The next morning, Tobias came into the kitchen before 6, which was unusual, and poured himself coffee, which was new. "You got fired," Tobias said. "How do you know that?" "You made rice and chicken and didn't tell me anything about your day." Desmond looked at his son, 15 years old, still a child in some ways and not in others, already learning to read silences the way Pauline used to. "I'll find something else. I know you will." Tobias wrapped both hands around his mug. "I'm just asking if you're okay." Desmond said yes. He was not entirely sure it was true. The story in the news had Isabel's name but not his. The arrest of Clifton Marsh for aggravated assault and fraud made the Edmonton Journal and 2 national outlets. And for a week the coverage focused on Marsh and on Gordon Fairweather's measured, furious statement to the press. Desmond read the articles on his phone at the kitchen table, and he thought about the woman in the hospital bed with her quiet, complete way of listening, and he thought about the coat he was never going to get back. He had been applying for work. Warehouses, a loading dock in Nisku, a janitorial position at a school that Tobias would have found either amusing or mortifying. Nothing had come through yet. The savings account had enough for 2 months, maybe 3 if they were careful, and Tobias never said a word about it. But he had started making his own lunches, without being asked, and had stopped requesting anything that cost money, and that small, unspoken accommodation was, somehow, the hardest thing. 6 weeks after the night on 118th Avenue, a black SUV idled outside Desmond's building for 3 minutes before the driver got out. Desmond was coming back from a walk. He had taken to walking in the afternoons, a habit that was partly exercise and partly a way of filling time that now felt too empty, and he stopped on the sidewalk when he saw the car. The driver was speaking into a phone. The rear door opened and a man stepped out who was tall, white-haired, and wearing a coat that probably cost more than Desmond's car. Gordon Fairweather looked older in person than in the photographs. He looked actually tired, the kind of tired that money cannot address, the kind that comes from sitting beside a hospital bed and understanding how close the other side is. He looked at Desmond. "Mr. Achille," he said. Not a greeting exactly, a recognition. "Mr. Fairweather, I'd like to talk to you, if you're willing." They went upstairs because Desmond was not sure where else to go. Gordon Fairweather sat on the couch in the small living room and looked at the framed photo of Pauline on the shelf and the stack of Tobias's textbooks on the coffee table and the mismatched furniture that was clean and cared for, and said something about the person who lived here, even if it said nothing about his bank account. He did not look uncomfortable. He looked, if anything, attentive. "Isabel told me everything," Gordon said. "About the 4 hospital visits, about losing your job. I had someone look into it. It wasn't necessary. No. But I'm 71 years old and my daughter is alive, and I've spent 50 years in a business that tells you everything can be reduced to a transaction. So I'd like to try." He reached into his jacket and removed an envelope. $500,000. It's yours. No conditions, no obligations, no press. Desmond looked at the envelope. He did not touch it. He thought about the savings account and the 2-month runway and Tobias making his own lunches without complaint. He thought about the rent and the Civic with the bad front tire and the orthodontics Tobias needed that Desmond had been quietly postponing. He thought about $11.40. He picked up the envelope. He held it for a moment. He set it back down. "I can't take it," he said. Gordon Fairweather was quiet for a moment. "May I ask why?" "Because Tobias is going to ask me where it came to him. And I'm going to have to explain it to him. And when I explain it to him, it's going to sound like..." Desmond stopped. He tried again. "I pulled over because it was the right thing to do, not because of what might come from it. If I take that money, I'm making it about the money. And that changes what I did. You're a stubborn man. My son would agree with you. Gordon looked at the photo of Pauline again. What do you want then? There has to be something. Desmond was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the heat clicked on in the apartment and then clicked off again. There's a kid in Tobias's class, he said finally. Bryce, 16 years old, single mom. She's a PSW working double shifts. Smart kid, top of the science class, wants to study environmental engineering. He's not going to get there without help, not without real help. Gordon waited. I'm not asking for my son, Desmond said. Tobias will be fine. He's got me and he's got his mother's stubbornness and he's going to be fine. But Bryce, he shook his head. I think about how many kids like him are in this city right now, in apartments like this one, just not getting through. Not because they're not good enough, because nobody stopped. It was quiet in the apartment. That's what I want, Desmond said. If you want to do something, fund the kid's education, and then look around and find the next one. Gordon Fairweather had been in rooms with people who wanted things from him for 50 years. He was very good, generally, at reading the nature of a want. He looked at Desmond Achille, at his worn work boots and his steady hands, and the particular quality of his stillness, and for the first time in a long time, he was not sure he was the most capable person in the room. He picked up the envelope and put it back in his pocket. He took out a different card. He set it on the table. Call me next week, he said. We'll set something up, for Bryce. And then we'll talk about the next one. He stood up. He shook Desmond's hand. He left. Tobias got home from school 40 minutes later and found Desmond still sitting at the kitchen table with a business card in front of him. Is that from the SUV? Tobias said. He had seen it from the bus, apparently. Nothing got past him. Yes. Who was it? Gordon Fairweather. Tobias sat down slowly. He knew the name. Everyone in Edmonton knew the name. What did he want? He wanted to give me money. Tobias looked at him with the full weight of 15 years of observation. Did you take it? No, a pause. Why not? Desmond turned the card over in his fingers. Because I'm trying to teach you something, and I couldn't figure out how to teach it and take the money at the same time. Tobias was quiet for a long moment. The refrigerator hummed. Someone in the apartment above them walked across their kitchen floor in what sounded like very deliberate steps. Okay, Tobias said finally. Okay? Okay, I get it. He reached over and took an apple from the bowl on the table. That doesn't mean we're not broke, though. We are absolutely still broke. Just checking, Tobias said and bit into the apple, and that was that. The following spring, Desmond started a new job at a construction supply company in Sherwood Park. Not as much per hour as the warehouse, but the foreman was a fair man and the work made sense to him. Bryce received a full scholarship letter in March for environmental engineering at the University of Alberta from a foundation registered 2 months earlier under the name of Gordon Fairweather's late wife. He showed up at Desmond's door with his mother to say thank you. And Desmond told them honestly that he had only made a suggestion. And the two adults stood in the doorway, being politely stubborn about credit, while their son stood behind them, looking at their phones. Isabel Fairweather called once. She did not call to offer anything. She called to say that she was fine, that the case against Clifton Marsh was proceeding, and that she had been thinking about the night on 118th Avenue and what would have happened if he had kept driving. Why didn't you? She asked. Keep driving. Desmond thought about it. I had a son at home, he said, and I kept thinking about what he'd ask me the next morning. There was a pause on the line. What would he have asked? He would have asked how my day was, Desmond said, and I would have had to answer. Isabel so said nothing for a moment. Then, your coat is still here, by the way. I had it cleaned and I keep forgetting to return it. Keep it, he said. I got a new one. That was almost true. He had found a decent one at Value Village for $18, which was $7 more than he'd had in his wallet on the night he stopped. and he considered that a reasonable investment. Tobias, who had overheard the last part of the call, looked up from his homework. "We have a coat," he said. "I know," Desmond said. "So why'd you say keep it?" Desmond sat down across from his son, at the same kitchen table where they had sat through that first winter, the one that started with $11.40, and a decision made in 3 seconds on a frozen avenue in November. "Because some things," he said, "you just let go." Tobias considered this with the careful skepticism of a 16-year-old who had, without entirely realizing it, been watching his father for years. Then he nodded once, a small, serious nod, and went back to his homework. And if you've ever stood in the cold wondering whether stopping would cost you more than you could afford, you already know what Desmond knew. The cost is never what you think it is. It's always something else entirely.